Know the truck?
Yes.
You know, you actually. So if you had to prepare more psukim, you would know how. And Haftorah.
So I want to jump in. Rabbi Andy Sacks, tell us a little bit about your role in the decision to create an egalitarian prayer space.
Well, in order to talk about the role today, we need to go back.
Yeah.
We, in 1997 and 1998, as we did every year, held an egalitarian davening on Shavuot and on Tisha B'Av in the back of the Kotel plaza in the back corner. But in 97, we were attacked by a group of zealously Orthodox troublemakers. And as the media reported, the next year there were stones, bags of milk, diapers with feces thrown at us. And we were escorted out in order to avoid the violence, but those who perpetrated it were left for another day. At that point, the then cabinet secretary, Bougie Herzog, who's today the head of labor, suggested that we have an alternative davening area at the place that people call Robinson's Arch, and provided a Sefer Torah. That year we had about a dozen minyanim at the spot, and the need grew. We only had one day a week then for an hour and a half. This year we have had 900 minyanim at the spot. And we have, every 3 years, would reopen the negotiation for more and more. And the real renegotiations came to a crescendo when Sharansky presented a grand plan that would have made one Kotel plaza with 3 sections. That took off, and essentially a modified form of that plan is what we agreed to.
So what's happened, what I've read now, there's a lot of backlash. People saying it's really not equal. People from the more progressive Jews saying, or the progressive Orthodox feminists saying, hey, this doesn't satisfy our need to read Torah as a la woman of the wall who want to read as women only. Now they're sort of being like as if their rights aren't taken into account. How do you respond to that?
I hear that argument all the time, and the first thing I would say is I'm sorry that, and I really am sorry that there are people who feel that they've been hurt by this and haven't been able to achieve what they want. But as Churchill or whoever it was said, politics is the art of the possible. That this agreement provides a solution to almost the entire Jewish world, and indeed the Women of the Wall as an organization came aboard and decided this was a good solution. We are not davening at the back of the bus. This is an entirely new bus filled with gasoline, and we're ready to take off. The real question is, what does that mean? Why is it so crucial for that small group, what they call the original Women of the Wall, which is really a tiny breakaway group, to daven in the women's section? First, as a Masorti conservative movement and the Reform movement, we have never advocated for separate davening. That is not our cause. Our cause was to open it up for people who would like egalitarian davening. The Orthodox world has already taken care of this. The Orthodox world has taken care of it. The women who continue to insist that they want to daven there have the right to daven in the egalitarian section. Built into the government agreement is that a mechitza may be set up there for Women of the Wall minyanim. So to sanctify that small spot, that's the women must daven in that small spot, they now will have the opportunity to daven as they wish, with talit and tefillin, with a Sefer Torah, with a mechitza if they choose, in the egalitarian sex. Secondly, a small group comes along. The Women of the Wall were empowered to have somebody negotiate on their behalf. A few women in that group did not like the negotiations. There are always going to be a few people, but I do not believe there's even close to the critical mass of people who are truly interested in maintaining any kind of davening in the women's section, and I think that's really key.
So you were before we started. You said you were in the room for the negotiations. So talk about that a little bit.
Well, what's really
what sparked the
Well, first of all, the arrest of the Women of the Wall for wearing talit and so forth is what really gave this a major push forward, where Netanyahu was forced to say, I understand this can't happen, this is bad for our image. He even came along by suggesting that we replace the architect we have selected with the architect who designed the replacement building for the Twin Towers. So it was a big-time decision.
Wow.
And the negotiations were all carried out in good faith, carried out by the Mazkir HaMemshala, the cabinet secretary, Avichai Mandelblit, who's actually a Haredi, ultra-Orthodox Jew. And at the table, it was a real negotiation because the so-called rabbi of the Kotel refused to budge. And in the end, we came to an agreement that really is good for almost everybody. In addition, by the way, for those who claim that the Orthodox, feminist, and other agreement that we signed removes the criminal... Part of the agreement we signed removes the criminal penalty for a woman wearing a talit, tefillin, or davening in the women's section. Will it be permitted? No. Will it be criminal? That has been canceled in the new agreement. And the large plaza behind the northern section of the Western Wall, where until recently they minimized and all but eliminated the swearing-in ceremonies for soldiers and the giving of ID cards to new immigrants. Now the idea is that area will not be under the religious control of the so-called rabbi of the Kotel, and mixed Army choir will be able to sing there again on Yom HaAtzmaut, Israeli Independence Day.
Fantastic. Are you hopeful that we're going to move, that this will be ratified by the Knesset?
It doesn't have to be ratified by the Knesset. It was already ratified by the government.
Okay.
There's about 25 to 30 million shekels that have been allocated for building the new area. It will be built in a way so that the entries to that whole area will be changed such that when one goes through security, you're able to see three sections: an egalitarian section, the women's section, and the men's section. So a person will understand there's a legitimate choice. And I actually believe that 10 years from now, this will be an integral part of the Kotel. And when classes in Israel of 3rd graders or 10th graders come to the Kotel, that'll be the spot. And when somebody comes as a foreign dignitary, they will not have to go to an area that discriminates against women or sees the men as having more rights than the women do.
Where's the section going to be taken from? How will it look different from what we saw today?
There's going to be, today, if you want to go to the egalitarian section, first of all, let me say the temporary platform that was built there for $80,000 is going to be removed. A new platform, it will extend all the way to the Kotel. The wooden stairs that were built for Women of the Wall are going to be extended 30 meters, and there will be new entryways. It will also be handicap accessible. Yes, there will be new entryways going up. The guard booth that today is at the entry to the Mugabri hill that goes up is going to be moved. There are concerns that the Waqf may see this as a violation of the status quo. However, they have also been informed about what is going on, and they knew that this was, and know that this is going to happen, and is not an effort in any way to diminish the authority that they have on the Temple Mount.
Got it. Did you ever think, you've been in Israel for how long now?
Since the end of '87.
End of '87. You've been working for these kind of issues your whole life in Israel, I think. Are you surprised? Can you believe it?
Well, I think the most important thing, and maybe the most remarkable thing, is this is the first time ever that the government has officially acknowledged the legitimacy of the reform and conservative movements in Israel. It is the first time they are legitimately funding them. And what is most important here is not the success in setting up an egalitarian section of the Kotel, because for most of us, at most, we'll be there a few minutes or a few hours a year. It's the realization that there's more than one way to live as a Jew, and that gives legitimacy to the reform and conservative and other movements, and it gives legitimacy and recognition thanks to the help of the Jewish communities in the diaspora and the Jewish communities here. And I would also add, it's only in the last 6 weeks or so that the Prime Minister of Israel has promised significant funding to the non-Orthodox movements in Israel, and 2016 will be a test of that. But the government will be paying to buy the Masorti conservative prayer books that are inclusive, that are gender sensitive, and those will be on the shelf for people to daven with on the government's dime. And I do want to say that I would be just as happy if the government got out of the religion business.
Right.
But that's not likely to happen. So until that day comes, we have to think that the government needs to understand that there are legitimate ways to live as a Jew and not just the ultra-Orthodox way.
All other prime ministers been Orthodox.
Every prime minister, every government in Israel has required the Orthodox political parties votes as part of their coalition, or know that they would need them in the next government, and so they would kowtow to the ultra-Orthodox. And this time, the ultra-Orthodox simply did not get their way.
Thanks, Rabbi.
Pleasure. And I'd just like to say, if I can, Shabbat Shalom to all those wonderful people in the greater Philadelphia area, because there is no basketball team in the NBA that has more room to move forward than the 76ers do, and very few baseball teams who will have the opportunity to improve so significantly as the Philadelphia Phillies do.
Ever the optimist, Rabbi Andy Sacks, former rabbi of Beth Am Israel.
Yes.
So Shabbat Shalom.
Where, by the way, I would have said is their middle name.
Yes. Beth Am.